This week, it's not a new season or a new patch. In fact, it's kind of hard for people to keep it all straight. Hey, it's Soul, and this is Warcraft Weekly, making it make sense at least internally, and I hope you're following along. You can help support the channel by liking this video, subscribing for more WoW coverage, and catch me where I'm live. Let's begin this week of confusion with an announcement from the WoW devs regarding the future of add-ons. We last talked about the many upcoming changes to the game that'll also eventually include removing certain add-on functionality in a long-term effort to keep the game's difficulty about where it is now, but without requiring add-ons where, without them, it would feel impossible to react with human speed. The announcement was directed to add-on authors in the Discord channel. I'll leave a link to their statement on the video description, but I'll summarize here. First, just like they told us in their more front-facing statements, it's going to be a while before changes happen to the API or Application Programming Interface, which affect add-ons. Add-on authors and us indirectly are going to know well ahead of time what sort of functionality will be affected. This will likely include both shutting down some of the tools that make some add-ons work, while spinning up new tech, new bits to the API to keep their add-ons that they don't want to affect from being compromised. So the process is going to feel a little bit more like surgery and not like a house demolition, at least we hope. Second was a lot of lip service and reiterating the dev team's goals, pointing out add-ons are a big part of how players experience the World of Warcraft, and what they're targeting isn't just about the top 1% of players, but to kind of flatten the so-called add-on requirement across the board. Part of that process is to change encounter design overall in such a way where add-ons that do the thinking for us aren't needed to solve the puzzle of a given fight or a trash pull, while still providing all the accessibility tools where necessary. It's a thread to needle, right? Requiring lots of input from authors and fans. So when I see some of you folks in the comments championing the kinds of functionality you need to play the game because of maybe a disability or an accessibility issue, definitely keep up with the feedback. Specifically, they announced a built-in damage meter to be brought in, as well as nameplate improvements, and that's just the start. It's also a big target on the backs of add-ons like Details and Plater and other add-ons that provide lots of information and customization. So for example, I have a feeling in the case of damage meters, they're going to approach this with gloves on, as in the Blizzard version is going to give us, like some basic information, but the Details add-on, it's likely to be untouched, as its function is mostly with post-combat analysis, with lots of additional bells and whistles that aren't likely to be in the built-in meter. Something like Plater, though, which when configured right can help identify dangerous mobs and ability casts, falls into that bucket of analyzing combat for us and is probably going to get knifed to the face. Blizzard already came out to say they want to add audio and visual cues to replace how add-ons reshape nameplates when an enemy performs like a big attack or a cast, basically doing what Plater's capable of, only it's going to be a natural part of how WoW combat works with no advanced tweaking needed. So I hope I'm helping to draw that distinction. There was one bit of news I was hoping to not hear though. From the post, they say, the goal is for our base UI to provide players with a good portion of the most important combat information add-ons currently provide. Most of this functionality will ship at the same time as these add-on restrictions, if not sooner. At first, this sounds a little jarring, as if there's going to be no time for players and add-on devs to prepare for these changes. There's a little bit to unpack here, like these big pieces or milestones to move around. So there's these changes to encounter design to curb the dependence on add-ons in the first place, and then there's the additions to the API, and then there's the disabling of parts to the API. A while back, when first reporting this, I figured that the best play for Blizzard was to enable the encounter design changes first and get an entire season's worth of feedback from the public, and then start doing these changes and turn off add-on functionality. So even the initial implementation would have this months-long rollout. In my headcanon, the expectation I have is maybe in the first season of Midnight, we'll see the combat revamp in raids and dungeons and wherever, and add-ons would still be intact, and we'd be in this testing and feedback phase all at once. And then in maybe a season 1 mid-patch or the 0.7 or even the next season, that's when we'll see the UI changes and the nerfs to add-ons. That'll give us a few months of lead time before the next season. It seemed to be the most reasonable move to make, because it would probably be catastrophic if the add-on changes happened with the midnight pre-patch. That'd be a huge ripping of the band-aid, so to speak, and our window for feedback would would be limited to what, like the PTR and the pre-patch and whatever raid testing happened. But let's introduce another thought. Maybe rolling out the API changes with Midnight's launch can happen, but we can still nail a soft landing. It could be that the upcoming Season 3 encounters will already reflect this new combat philosophy. Meanwhile, add-ons are still going to work the way they have been, which might result in like some weird or maybe tainted feedback. Now, by that, I mean encounter mechanics might feel slow. People might be like, hey, why is it taking so long for things to happen? I feel like I have way too much lead time to run out of these swirls and coordinate these big dance movements. But it's not combat being too easy. It's just being balanced around human reaction time, and we still have our super responsive add-ons. Big if, but if there's a Season 4, maybe the changes can fall under that kind of timeline too. I can predict a good window of opportunity where there's a reasonably spaced rollout of these milestones, just a question of where they decide to land. Is Dastardly Duos the kind of content gamers want? It's an open question, and you don't need to hear my rationalizations, my excuses, or my copium before answering. How you feel about it is your honest take, and Blizzard ought to hear it. And after going through the motions a bit and seeing how high of a score I was able to get, my early impression of it is, it's not quite hitting me. I'm going to share why in a second, but in listening to players and reading other reactions, a lot of folks are left wanting. They're getting a game mode that showed some promise, but the execution so far, at least, it hasn't quite landed. The rewards aren't so great, and spacing the matches out over weeks makes it feel like kind of a drag. Now, there might be a payoff. I don't know what it is, but more importantly, what good is the hope of feeling good about it tomorrow when I'm not really feeling it today, right? At the same time, Dastardly Duos is partially the product of Blizzard mostly listening and answering certain feedback. Like, for example, players don't want a super grindy limited time event for cosmetics. That was loud and clear during Plunderstorm's first and second rounds. Folks don't want to wait so long for gear catch-ups. Delves and Professions, they already fill that gap, and Nightfall took care of veteran track gear. Meaning Duos isn't the kind of event that will punish players if they don't show up. Also interesting, Blizzard seems confident about this game mode, hyping it up some with Platinum WoW showing up, and over this weekend there's going to be a head-to-head featuring Team Liquid and Echo. So maybe we're missing something. Maybe this week's matches were just a bad choice and later matches will ramp up the spectacle. Whatever the case though, I'm going to give some specific takes of the today, and let's see if we're on the same page. I have the very strong impression duos were designed and built up with a full party of actual players in mind first, and the solo options were like more recently added for a few reasons. It's a bit weird the Dragonscale Expedition is showing up again, and it shows with the strategy of these encounters where you want to fight and defeat enemies inside this bonus territory for additional score, unless a player takes up the tank role either as the actual tank or by using the food buff that makes you kind of be a pretend tank, you have like no chance of getting a decent score. It kind of makes the solo option feel sort of tacked on and unsatisfying. This changes a lot though, with at least one additional player in the mix, and again, one's got to be the tank to help manage the battlefield. It's then where Duos gets this more video game-like feel, as long as you're motivated at least, because not everyone feels compelled with a private score that is best shared on social media. Even if this might be an early experiment of Blizzard's, it would have felt a lot better if this score was posted somewhere, so we could see where we stand within our friends list or our guild, our realm, our region, or the world, of course. Without that structure in place, seeing our score, it's like whoop-de-doo, but it doesn't have that much value. By contrast, the Brawlers Guild gave out shirts, among other cosmetics, and I look back on that feature a little bit more fondly. Now, of course, it was also very different being exclusively solo, with encounter design circling around that, as opposed to taking a few already existing boss mechanics and stacking that together against 1 to 5 players, and then seeing what happens. Whatever the case, I'm going to take this feature very chill and show up each week to check out the new encounter and, see if anything's added to the gameplay side of things. The kind of cool thing here is that this event does overlap with the upcoming patch in less than 2 weeks. So if I want to, I can take my alts in there, who I have no idea how to play, and strap on that one-button macro, and then just kind of burr my way into a bunch of veteran gear pieces. We're not quite ready to look back on Season 2, at least not until we get 11.1.7 with like the delve stuff and the story and the other elements, but I wanted to take a moment to talk very high level about what goes into Season, the challenges that developers face, and how we consume our time. The devs seem to be in this kind of happy world of 6-month-long seasons separated into these 3 parts. The first part brings us the real meat of the things. We get the new zone and the raid, we get a round of dungeons and PvP things all wrapped into that season package, and maybe a couple of extras. Halfway through the season, the guardrails that stop us from hard farming crests and whatnot, that's lifted. We recently saw this with the turbo boost doing a lot more than lifting crest caps. I think it's been a great success at adding an adrenaline boost to the season activity. There's more to do in the familiar spaces of WoW's pillar content. Lately, we've been seeing a more regular cadence of leveling events to get us through the tail end of patches, which is also great for the audience who doesn't live on the gear treadmill, but still wants to continue playing and maybe growing their stable of characters. The mid-patches, in the meantime, have been these random batches of experiments like Dastardly Duos and outdoor community stuff like Nightfall, and even the uplifting of old features like Horrific Visions and more. But where do these things fit in, wedged inside season content that really it already offers a very full experience of gearing up and overcoming challenges and earning rewards? Like, are these smaller features worth the effort? I mean, yeah, there's an element of catching up in some of these events and features, and there's a load of cosmetic rewards. Outside of Dastardly Duos, all of these cosmetics and activities can be done and earned well after the story's moved on. The consequence of having these already robust options of gameplay and progression is that as players, in a way, we expect the mid-patches to be as compelling and as rewarding if we happen to be done with our season goals to have something new to progress to, but also it shouldn't peel us off in such a way that we're forced to pause our dungeon and raid and delve progression if we're not done with all of our season goals because, oh gosh, now there's this easier feature that lets us skip all of that. Something, respect my time. It devalues our efforts up until that point. And of course, the feature's got to be fun. This upcoming patch, and a reminder, it's not going to be a new season for another 2 months. This patch will include what I think is a very significant feature in lore walking. This feels less like an evergreen one-shot piece of content and more like the potential birth of a platform for storytelling vignettes and leveling too. It sets the stage for gamers to have maybe a bunch of these bite-sized quest experiences that eventually, when you put it all together, becomes this full-on leveling experience. I'm speculating here, but it probably won't be as fast as grinding time walking during a leveling event, but for lore heads and newer players, this could turn out to be a really fun way to level with complete storytelling, where speed isn't quite as important, although people are going to want it to be as important. I'm only speaking for myself with this next part, but personally, I 1000% prefer this style of season where we get a thing and it lasts for a few weeks, and then we get another thing and that lasts for a few weeks, and so on and so forth. To me, it feels better than the front-loaded style where we got everything there is to do at the start of the season, and then it was stretched out to last for 4 or 5 or 6 months. I remember how long it took for Korthia and Zereth Mortis to be fully accessible, but I did like sliding between the Mega Dungeon and Time Rifts and the Dream Surge questing during Season 2 of Dragonflight. But ultimately, those still are very familiar activities, just dressed differently. I think what we've been seeing is the WoW team earnestly trying to deliver a lot of different kinds of experiences for all of its players. Naturally, we're going to like different things, we're going to have our takes, but one thing seems clear to me. This might blow your mind, but this is a pretty old game. 20 years of being spoon-fed one thing after another, one activity after another with bread and butter gameplay and a lot of experiments in between. But no matter what we do, we're working towards the same familiar things. Dastardly Duos took that, brave, small step at introducing a new twist on gameplay with these arcadey bonuses and quirky encounters and a score to measure against friends. I just don't feel like it's good enough, it's too small of a step in a different direction, but hey, it's a different direction and there's something to appreciate there. I already talked up how player housing is also a new kind of reward because it goes beyond just collection. We're getting a sandbox of endless possibilities we've never had before. In other words, it's WoW leaning hard into empowering our sense of roleplay and personalization. And maybe that's the additional vector we ought to lean hard into when we ask ourselves, what's going to be a satisfying experience between seasons, or at least during these mid-patches? Dastardly Duos, as cool as it wants to be, feels like a distraction in the context of the expansion story. Nightfall brings us closer to what's at stake, but it doesn't quite capture that feeling of Warcraft, I don't think. I think of other role-playing games where we arrive at a spot and we slowly fix up this ruined or dilapidated area, and then we turn it into this thriving town or a fortress where we eventually wage war against the enemy. So how about we try to recapture that in like this small group or solo Warfront-like experience? I mean, like maybe it would have all the familiar trappings of building and gearing up and progression and rewards that happen over a long period of time, not just queue up and get everything done like Warfronts are. But part of that fulfillment comes from running alongside this army you helped create. Like maybe you can choose a few AI bodyguards and power them up, and you get this immersive moment of being a badass on the front lines, or maybe behind the lines, managing resources and directing troops. Something bold like that might not fit in a mid-patch, but what if it was part of the 0.5? Like that would give the flexibility of giving this Warfront town style feature thing longer legs. Like the 0.5 gives this much in gear rewards and progression, the 0.7 amps it up a little bit more. Obviously, this isn't a real idea, and there's a very good chance that if they introduced something large like this, it would totally suck, and we would have to suffer through it for the next X many months. But it's an example of how maybe we can have one large-scale feature instead of like a bunch of bite-sized ones, and how rewards don't necessarily have to be player power or even cosmetics, but maybe a town we helped shape into our own image, a mark that we leave on the world. And that's the show. Next week ought to be a wrap on the Horrific Vision coverage, as I want to do a reshoot of the 5 and 8 mask run with the current power-ups available to give a better perspective of how it feels. But we're coming close to a new patch as well, so there's a lot to look forward to. For now, let's wrap it up with a big thanks to everyone on stream. Y'all have been great company. To our beloved patrons, thanks a ton for your support. And I want to give a special shout out to Patty, who offered went the wrong way, who offered a bunch of plushies back there, and you definitely delivered. Thank you so much. I need to find more space for it. And we can't forget about you, viewer. You made it to the end. You fed the algorithm. So now all that's left is to like the video, subscribe for more WoW coverage, catch me live, and I'll catch you later. Stay safe, stay healthy, and stay breezy.